There's a dark figure that has haunted the dreams and waking moments of hundreds of people around the world. A story that oftentimes depicts a dark, looming shadow figure dressed in a wide-brimmed hat, often standing silently at the edge of your vision. He has no face, no identifiable features, yet his presence sends chills down the spines of those who encounter him. He is simply known as the Hat Man. But where did this come from? Is it real? Or is it another internet ghost story? Today, we dive deep into the eerie phenomenon of the Hat Man, a shadowy figure reported by hundreds, if not thousands of people across the globe. The Hat Man is often described as a tall, shadowy figure, standing well over 6 feet. He wears a distinctive wide-brimmed hat and a long trench coat or cape that sways eerily as though moved by an unseen breeze. Those who have encountered this entity often talk about a strange, intense, indescribable sensation of fear or anxiety, which, understandably, makes a lot of sense given the situation. But oftentimes, those who encounter him are completely frozen still, unable to move or run away. Unlike other supernatural shadow figures that are occasionally caught on a camera in a haunted location, such as a creepy hotel or an abandoned house, which are often vague and anamorphous as is, the Hat Man's form is sharply defined. His presence feels deliberate, calculated, and almost as if he wants to make himself known on purpose. But why? Witnesses say he usually just stands there, watching, as though he were waiting for something, anything. But most people who encounter this entity never get a chance to get a close look before it disappears, whether it be from sleep paralysis or just too afraid to react. What makes the Hat Man so chilling is the sheer number of encounters reported over the decades, and, might I add, across multiple continents. He has been seen in the United States, Europe, Asia, Africa, and beyond, all having strikingly similar experiences and counts of seeing it and encountering its strange gaze. They describe waking up in the middle of the night, unable to move, with the Hat Man standing over them, watching as they lay helplessly in bed. Some have even described participating in illicit activities and seeing this strange entity. Whether this is just paranoia or an altered mind, we will never know. But again, they describe seeing the same figure down to the very last detail. Others, while not super common, have seen him during moments of extreme stress, trauma, or grief. And some don't even see him at all until they fall asleep, only to be plagued by vivid nightmares where the Hat Man stalks them in the distance, which makes this even stranger. So it's not isolated to just sleep paralysis or drugs. You can be dealing with hardship or grief. Hell, you can even be dreaming and encounter this by sheer chance. But how does this work? How can so many people who have never spoken to each other share the same terrifying vision? And what is required for one to even encounter it in the first place? I somehow managed to find someone who has not only encountered this entity, they were willing to come forward and talk about this, even kind enough to agree to an interview for this video. Give it a listen. Start with your name, your age, and where you're from.
My name is Nancy. I'm 24 and I'm from Narnia.
Narnia, wow. Okay. In extreme detail, what was your first encounter with the Hat Man?
Well, at first I didn't really believe in stuff like that. Um, so yeah, I was visiting a family quite often and sleeping at their place, and they lived in a mansion, but it was like an old abandoned mansion that they had bought, and they had rebuilt it themselves, and it really needed rebuilding, and they did that, and it looked really beautiful after they were done. Um, but it was like a really old mansion where rich people used to live, uh, and I didn't really think anything of it. Um, and one of the family members told me that they see a person with a hat, and they see a girl who always sits at his mom's bedroom, and I was like, okay, whatever. Are you like trying to scare me? And months went by. And there was some weird sounds and everything, but I didn't see anything, so I wouldn't really believe it because I didn't see anything. But one day, I was just looking in the room and I saw a tall figure. And keep in mind, I was not asleep. I was not sleeping. I was not like on anything or whatever people do to see it. But I was just walking around, and then suddenly I saw a tall figure, and it had a long hat, and it had red eyes, red glowing eyes. You couldn't really see the face. It was blurry. It didn't really. It had a face without having a face. I don't know if that made sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Um, yeah. So I was scared because it was just staring back at me, and it was really tall. And I cannot describe the kind of fear. I had such a deep fear that I still can feel today. But I was so scared at that moment that I felt paralyzed, and I didn't really dare to move for a long while. So I was just staring back at it, and it was staring back at me. Um, and then I finally got the courage to move. So I went out to a family member, and I said, "Hey, wake up." And I really tried to wake them up, but yeah, they didn't want to wake up. I mean, they did hear me and stuff, but they were too sleepy to want to wake up. So I just looked back at the hat man, and it was just staring back at me still. And then suddenly, after a while, the hat man just started moving. But he was moving very slowly, by the way. It was almost like in slow motion. But while it was moving, it suddenly became less scary. I don't know if it was because it was harder for me to see him anymore, because he was slowly starting also to disappear from me being able to see him. So I don't know if it was because he transformed, or if it's because I started to slowly not being able to see him anymore. But anyways, he stopped looking like a scary figure to me, and he just walked away from me and walked through the piano and then through the wall, which was super weird. So I don't know what the intention was for the headman, but it was just staring at me and it was scaring me. And from what I've looked up, it's like maybe they feed off of people who are in fear. But I don't know anything about that. I just know that it was staring at me, and it was slowly walking slowly, and then walked through the piano and then through the wall, and then it disappeared, and I never saw him ever again.
And
But
just for
that was
and just for clarity's sake, not to cut
yeah,
you off, you've never heard of the Hat Man before, or anything
no,
like that.
never, never.
Interesting. A huge shout out to Nancy for agreeing to this interview. Not only has she had her fair share of encounters of the paranormal, but she has also approached this whole situation with a very skeptical mind. Thank you so much, Nancy, for the interview. There are several theories about who or what the Hat Man might be. Some of these are more far-fetched than others, in my opinion, but I'll leave that up for you to decide. The first theory is sleep paralysis. The most scientific explanation is sleep paralysis, a condition where a person wakes up but cannot move. This state often triggers vivid hallucinations, including shadowy figures and other nightmare-like beings, to be projected into reality. Experts suggest the Hat Man is just a projection of the mind during these moments of vulnerability, which, might I add, is the most plausible theory. Although that doesn't fully explain why people who have reportedly been drinking or taking substances have claimed to see it, nor does it explain why grief-stricken individuals have claimed to see it as well, especially when they're wide awake in broad daylight or even in groups, hanging out with friends. So that brings us to our second theory. an interdimensional being. This one's a little out there, so bear with me. Some believe that the Hat Man isn't a hallucination, but an entity from another dimension. This theory proposes the idea that he slips through the cracks of reality to observe us. Why he appears in his distinct outfit remains a mystery, but some suggest that it is to blend with historical time periods where such attire was more common. Gonna be honest, this doesn't make much sense to me given how the Hat Man is said to only appear to certain individuals with specific circumstances. While I have an open mind to the supernatural and this idea of different dimensions and realities, this honestly seems like a stretch. So that leads us to our third theory, a demonic presence. As stated previously, witnesses report an overwhelming sense of dread when encountering the Hat Man, as though he purposefully induces the fear in his victims. In a select few cases, people have reported misfortune or death following their sightings, adding to the fear that the Hat Man isn't just watching, he's warning, a deadly premonition of things to come. A similar scenario to how people view the Mothman, which I really should do a video on, appearing shortly before disasters happen. But unfortunately, I'm not sure if I'm sold on that either. But let me introduce a more logical explanation. Mass hysteria, or the collective unconscious. Here's a more logical explanation to this all, in my personal opinion. Carl Jung's concept of the collective unconscious suggests that certain archetypes, like shadowy figures, are shared amongst humans. Perhaps the Hat Man is simply a universal symbol of fear, projected outwards in moments of vulnerability. And this checks out on so many levels. Human brains, without us even realizing it, or even thinking about it, all have various manifestations that have been inherited from thousands of years ago. Unconscious archetypes that emerge in myths, dreams, stories, even religion. And by sheer coincidence, one of these archetypes is the shadow, the darker hidden parts of our psyche. It's our repressed desires, instincts, and fears that we don't want to acknowledge or face. And while personal fears may differ, there is still a part of humanity that shares a collective fear. I feel as if this could potentially be the answer to all of this. But I will say this though, it is very odd how everyone has described him wearing the same outfit and met him in the same manner. To me, that is a bit odd. Plus, I'm not a doctor or an expert on the mind or anything for that matter, so take my personal theory with a grain of salt. While I am semi-skeptical of what the Hat Man truly is, I can't deny just how eerie and creepy the stories are. Even by someone like me who doesn't really get creeped out all that often. This was a very unsettling topic to cover, and I can't get quite enough of it. I absolutely love rabbit holes like this. For me personally, I'm not really sure what to label this as, but I would love to know what you guys think down below. And if you've encountered the Hat Man in any degree, I'd love to hear your thoughts below. But for now, as always, thank you guys for watching. I love you all, and good night.
Hello. Jake is a cake. I don't know.
Okay. Okay.